Episode 6 Universal Basic Rights. Now that I'm practically stranded on this planet, I shall make good use of my very human space. No, wait, was it time? I shall make very good use of my human time. Well, whatever the humans refer to the expansion of the universe anyway. Nowhere else in the whole universe does any entity count the expansion in minutes, days, weeks, or even years. But I suppose humans need to relate to something tangible anyway, like their orbit around the star they call the sun. You see, nothing really makes sense on the planet of Earth. How they live, how they count, how everything is given a number to be accounted for, just like an entirely separate language. And do you know what else they count with those numbers? Money. A very precarious topic for them. They measure each other's status and success on this planet by the number or by the amount of money they accumulate. But now that I'm stranded here too, I myself am in a very precarious situation where I seem to be coerced into validating my 3D existence by accumulating some of those money too. And whilst I'm pondering on how to exploit myself for a couple of pounds sterling, why don't I find out more about the meaning of precarity, the precariat, from my next human guest, British economist Guy Standing, so that I can find out whether I would be eligible for some universal basic income.
I've crashed here. Well, not really crashed here. I've been just sent by the Galactic Federation to this planet to figure out where the glitch is coming from, and there's a problem. And I'm investigating by asking different humans about their expertise in their field and their way of trying to change this planet for the better. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, no, you see. So far we've spoken to feminists, activists, people who are activists in disability and access, and have explained to us how sometimes people are very governed by fear and don't really and like to control for fear. And my journey on this planet, I have had to speak to an artist, and she told me a lot about fear and how humans control their lives and the way they live, and tell other people how to live for fear. So I looked into how what makes humans angry and what makes humans want to talk about social justice. So I came across somebody called Guy Standing, and I'm standing in front of him right now, and I'd like to know a little more about your work and your contribution to human social affairs. Hello, Guy.
Great. Very nice to talk to you, and welcome to the planet. I hope you enjoy your stay more than many people in the group that I write about are enjoying their lives at the moment.
Well, I'm finding it interesting, and it's a little confusing for me because lots of humans have lots of different emotions that they experience and express. Well, as you know, the universal cosmic laws are love, appreciation, and total harmony. And I don't really see these three laws of the universe being practiced very well down here. So I'd like to ask you, where is the social justice? Where do you fit in here?
I'm an economist, and I've been working on the issues we're talking about for over 30 years since I completed my PhD. The economics that I understood as the mainstream back in the 1980s have been profoundly changed. And what we have today is a world economic system which I characterize as rentier capitalism. And what that means is that more and more of the income, the wealth, and the power is going to a tiny plutocracy that is gaining from rents. That means from owning property, physical property, financial property, intellectual property, so-called, and that there's a new class structure across the world which has emerged as a result of this growth of rentier capitalism. And it's got a plutocracy at the top, tiny percentage 0.1% of the world's population, who are billionaires, have phenomenal power, tend to be extreme right-wing populists in their politics, like a man called Elon Musk, and the representative of his perspective in Donald Trump, a man who systematically tells more lies than you can imagine, a man who is threatening to leave vulnerable groups even more vulnerable, and is a very dangerous phenomenon. And he is being echoed and supported by people in Europe, by people like Orban in Hungary and Le Pen in France and Nigel Farage in Britain. So we have a political crisis which is enormously important. And when I started working in the United Nations back in the 1980s, I realized that the economics of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were going to create far more insecurity and inequality. And I believed right then that our old welfare state system that had been built up after the Second World War was collapsing. It was no longer functional in the emerging class structure. And I wrote a book called The Precariat.
All right.
And the precariat is the rapidly growing mass class of the world. And many artists understand the precariat. Many people across the world belong to the precariat. My book on the precariat has been translated into 25 languages, and I've been asked to give talks on it in 42 countries, hundreds of talks. And it's a phenomenon that the mainstream politics have not been representing in many cases. But I'm pretty impressed by the fact that artists in different arts have understood. For me, the epitome in terms of an artist of the precariat is Banksy, the artist of the precariat. But others are also understanding it. I was asked to do a musical video with Massive Attack during COVID. They contacted me and they said, what you're saying is absolutely relevant. And it's that work that I've been doing that I think has made you perhaps want to contact me. And I'll deal with my solutions in the course of our discussion.
Yeah, exactly. Because it sounded like you're human on human side, and it sounded like the precariat are most humans on this planet, and for some reason or another, they suffer at the hands of the very few people on top. When you said that media don't really reflect on your theory in the precariat, is it because the people on top are afraid? Is it because they're driven by fear? Do you think there's any way or any risk of them getting involved and attacking this new idea?
Well, I think we have to understand the politics in a more nuanced way. The class structure not only has this tiny plutocracy at the top, but further down, there's a salariat, what the people who got permanent full-time employment with pensions, with paid holidays, with paid medical leave. And they are also benefiting from the rentier system, with share options and property prices going up and up. And this group tends to be fairly conservative and not reach out to the precariat until they find that their sons and daughters are not going into the precariat. They're not going into the salariat, they're going into the precariat. And then I find that quite a lot of those people, when they come to my talks, they ask to buy several copies of my book because they want to give one to their son and one to their daughter or something like that. And we've got a situation where the precariat consists of people who are doing unstable labor. They have to do a lot of work for which they're not paid, but they have to do it. They have to do a lot of work for the state, trying to get benefits or entitlements. And at the same time, they have a level of education which is higher than the type of labor they can typically expect to obtain, the sort of jobs they can obtain. And this creates a sense of status frustration, a sense of angst, a sense of anomie, in the sense of hopelessness. And the precariat now consists, in my estimation, about half the population. But it is split into three groups. The first group are the relatively uneducated, in formal sense, who've come from old working class communities and families, and they had a better yesterday than they have today.
Okay.
Now, this group listens to the sirens of populism, the Donald Trumps, the Nigel Farages, the Viktor Orbans, and so on. And those people are promising to bring back yesterday,
Oh no.
to make America great again, or something like that, you know? And they tend to support these populists who are blaming migrants or the others or disabled people or some group they like to demonize. Okay?
Yes.
Now, this group has been supporting a neo-fascist agenda, and it's very dangerous. The second group in the precariat consists of the minorities, the migrants, the ethnic minorities who don't have a sense of home. They don't have a today and now. And this group tends to be disenfranchised. They don't vote for populist far right, and they're waiting for something so that they can belong to. And this group we're talking about hundreds of millions of people across the world. And the third group are people who go to university, go to colleges, become artists, who won't vote for the atavists. They won't be disinterested in politics, but they're waiting for a new sense of the future. They have lost the sense of a future. And this group is looking for a new progressive politics. And I find that I'm talking to this type of person all over the place, whether it's in Amsterdam or Tokyo or Shanghai or New York or in any part of Britain. And this group is disillusioned with mainstream politics of the old variety. We've just had an election in Britain, and the winning party, the Labour Party, received the votes of under 20% of the electorate. Under 20%. 34% of those who voted. But many people didn't vote. So people are not actually excited by those who are winning, and some are supporting a fascist agenda like is being offered by the far right. So we have a major crisis, and that crisis is combined with an ecological crisis, a crisis with global warming, a crisis where we're losing species. I've written a book called The Blue Commons, where we're losing the life in the sea. It's disappearing, it's become extinct, and nobody's taking much notice of it. And we have a situation where the commons, which is the crucible of a good society, the commons, that which belongs to all of us, have been eroded by privatization, commodification, and so on, which is intensifying the insecurities of the precariat. And we need a new politics of paradise. And that is what I've been trying to work on with friends in our networks. And that is where artists have such an important role to play.
Indeed, Kai. And I, as the outsider, the biggest kind of type of outsider on this planet, I'm a bit confused how, when it comes to education or funding, how come is it that the art sector is always the underfunded one? How come is it that this is the one that doesn't get as much attention as placements in banking or law and corporate things that humans go to or prefer to go to?
Well, It's a very good question. And if you think about it, our education system is one of the biggest problems in our society globally.
Right.
It used to be, for example, that you went to university or college to pursue paideia, a search for truth, a search for liberation, a search for artistic relevance, and to see nature and humanity together. It used to be a system for liberating our minds, liberating our capacities. But again, going back to this economics revolution, suddenly in the 1980s and 1990s, the education system became a system to create what they call human capital. And human capital means people who are able to get high income jobs, high income jobs. And if you can convert your education system into a factory, we're talking about losing a sense of our culture, losing a sense of history, losing a sense of philosophy and beauty and the connection with nature. If all you do is when you go to college or university, all you're concerned with is maximizing your income after you leave, then you're going to be distracted from an appreciation of culture. And it takes a brave person in these circumstances to continue with art, whatever the different art it might be. I really am very afraid of censorship, not so much for myself, but for everybody, in the sense that more and more we know that artificial intelligence is being used to control us, manipulate us, and drive people into fear. Fear of expressing their opinions, fear of taking actions because there will be long-term adverse consequences, or they think there might be, and there could be,
Okay.
in terms of things in many years in the future. In those circumstances, it takes courage to even think subversively. And certainly it takes courage for artists to express themselves in a creative way, which is a risk-taking way. Artists have always had to take risks. But today, those risks can have long-term consequences. So therefore, we need communities to be strong around people with diverse opinions. And that goes back to where we are at the moment and why I've been an advocate of basic income for the past 30 years. And I think that's one of the reasons why you wanted to speak to me.
Yes.
Because I think we are at a situation where unless we have a move in the direction of everybody who's listening has a modest basic income as a guarantee, we will have people not doing what they want to do, being fearful, having mental health problems because of their insecurities, and be driven towards suicidal tendencies. We've seen a huge increase in suicides over the past 10 years or more, but it's strongly upwards, and particularly among young women. And it's because of mental health stresses, the feeling that we don't have a sense of control of our time. My new book is called A Politics of Time. And the politics of time means that people in the precariat have no control over their time. They feel constantly under pressure, and they suffer from what I've called the precariatized mind. Mm-hmm. The sense, I don't know what is the best thing to be doing. Now, tomorrow, today, yesterday, I don't know what's the best time. What's the best thing to be doing? And these compound the problems of insecurity. And it's a particular form of insecurity we're experiencing. It's what we economists call uncertainty. And uncertainty means we don't know what is going to happen. We are faced with unknown unknowns. Any of us can have a shock tomorrow and not have the capacity to recover from that. And millions of people feel that they could become homeless, they could become without any sense of anchor in their networks, in their society, and so on. And this feeling has to be confronted. And the only way that we can do that is to move towards everybody having a guarantee as an individual economic right to have a basic income. To be able to say tomorrow, I'm going to have enough money for my food, my rent, for my networking, just that much. And we've got to move in that direction because at the moment we're moving in the opposite direction, which is causing more and more of the problems we've been talking about.
So when you talk about time, the way I used to understand time until now was how planets and celestial bodies rotate around each other and move the universe forward, but you humans have designed time to revolve around some capitalist production of things and have divided the day into 24 hours and a 9 to 5, which is a very rigid profit benefiting time construct. And I understand that this is the kind of type of time that gets people anxious and gets them to feel in a limbo of uncertainty. When you think of introducing the universal basic income, do you think that would defy this construct of time over time and get people to free themselves of it?
I do, but let me go back a little because what you're talking about is the reality you find on arriving in planet in
Yeah.
2024.
Yes.
Our ancient Greeks taught us a different way of looking at time. For them, the difference began with differentiating between work and labor. Labor was what the citizen tried to avoid. Labor was being in a position of subordination, in doing jobs, in things like the slaves did. It was something that was not regarded as desirable. But work around your home, with your friends, with your relatives, with your creative networks was valuable. Now, in the development of capitalism, particularly since the 19th century, all work that is not labor disappears from our statistics, disappears from GDP economic growth, disappears from our rhetoric about work. For example, the most valuable form of work in Britain today is care work. And care work, unpaid care work, is worth more in terms of economic value, but is given a value of 0 in measures of economic growth. So if you increase the amount of time you spend on caring for those you love, your elderly mother or your children, economic growth goes down.
That's right.
People are not doing work according, but this is crazy. So if I look after your elderly mother, growth goes up, labor goes up, jobs go up. And if you look after my elderly mother, the same. But if you look after your own elderly mother and I look after my elderly mother, then economic growth goes down. And apparently, according to the statistics, work goes down. Now, we have to escape from this idiocy. It's sexist. It is ridiculous because the most valuable things we do are given a value of 0.
Wow.
If I spend my time growing vegetables on an allotment, okay, then it's given a value of 0. If I spend time digging potatoes for your allotment, it's added to economic growth. Well,
Yeah.
this is the economics of madness.
Wow, this
right?
is nonsense. Yes.
But there's at the same time, Ani, what we the ancient Greeks made a distinction between recreation and leisure, which they called schole. And schole combined public participation in the life of the polis, the life of society, with education. Whereas recreation was what you did in your spare time with your friends, playing games, keeping fit, etc. And we've lost that distinction. Okay, so we've actually lost a sense of real leisure. Spending time in political activities, spending time in public art. This is eroded because you don't make money. And it doesn't give you a sense of being in control because it's risk-taking. Now, for me, that ancient Greeks had one other thing, which they called ergia. Aristotle and Socrates. Ergia meant literally idleness. Idleness. And they realized that it was essential for the human condition for people to have adequate amount of time for ergia. And this went forward in a famous statement, an aphorism of Cato. Cato said, never is a man more active than when he's doing nothing.
Okay, yes.
And that is so important for an artist. Michelangelo spent a lot of time doing nothing, or apparently.
Yeah.
But in his mind and his body, it was regenerating his genius. And we have lost that because nowadays, if somebody is doing nothing, they're called lazy. They're called parasites. They're called idle, all sorts of insults and punished by our benefit system. And for me, one of the beauties of basic income is it would give people more sense of control of their time to do the work and the leisure that they really want to do. And we have found that with experiments among artists in Ireland, in California, in Canada, in India. When people have basic income, they spend more time doing artistic work, craft work where they take a risk in their minds. And for me, a basic income for artists is obvious. It's obvious. It's the same we have a pilot going on in Wales that's been done by the Welsh government for people who are leaving care homes, leaving orphanages. When they come out, they used to have terrible, terrible insecurities. Under this basic income pilot in Wales, they've been given a basic income for 2 years. And of course, it helps enormously. It gives people a chance to experiment. It gives people a chance to take risks, to try this and try that. Isn't that what we should want everybody to have?
Would you say that these humans were happier?
Oh, the beautiful thing about the pilots was we've now had over 100 pilots, and I've written about them in a book called Basic Income. Okay. And what we found is that in every pilot that I know about has resulted in improvements in mental health, improvements in happiness, and increase in work, but work of the type they want to do.
Yeah, and not the one they are subjected to.
They're forced to do. We must get away from thinking that jobs are all that matters. Our politicians need to be criticized. They all talk about increasing jobs. Well, most jobs for most people are boring and alienating and not satisfying. And we've got to say, okay, jobs have to be done. We don't want to be naive. But don't idolize them and put them on a pedestal as if that was all that mattered in life.
Yeah, don't you think they're doing that because they're afraid that people are going to walk out of those jobs and leave?
It'd be great. But as a matter of fact, people increase work. If jobs need to be done, then wages and working conditions should attract people to do them, right? They should be attracted by wages. If I want to do a job and the job pays enough, I'll do it. Okay. The point is not to be forcing everybody into jobs. Make them attractive. Many people will want them because a basic income by itself won't stop them wanting to have an improvement in their life, right?
Right.
It's people who have a basic income are energized, are given more confidence, and they want to work more, not less. We found in our pilots that people who have a basic income work more, not less.
And I know you've mentioned a very important word in one of your books, emancipation.
That's the most beautiful piece of news that I want to bring you from our experiments. We did an experiment in Africa, and when it was finishing, I went down to one of the villages and I called some young women
Yes.
across to speak to me. And I said, what's the best thing about having had a basic income? And they were nervous. They were timid speaking to a foreigner. But one of them had the courage and she said, before we had our basic income, when the men came down from the fields at the end of the month with their wages, we had to say yes.
Yes.
We had to say yes. Now we have our basic income, we can say no.
Very
That's
good word.
emancipation.
Yes,
That's emancipation. And I can give a lot of other forms of example, people escaping from bonded labor, from oppressive relationships. Many people don't leave oppressive relationships because they're financially frightened. When they have a basic income, they can make decisions for themselves. That is a beauty about having security. And security increases your mental bandwidth. It increases your capacity, and it actually raises your IQ. We've shown this. And this is really fundamental about justice. Because if your mental capacities are reduced by your insecurities, you can't be rational. It's a form of injustice that is so fundamental. And here we are today with plenty of knowledge. We know a basic income works. We've tested it out with thousands of people in different contexts. The real challenge is political. And I believe the artists of the world have a role to play in moving in this direction. That's why I was delighted that Massive Attack approached me, while certain musical groups have invited me to talk, and why many artists understand that because they understand insecurity and they understand being in control of your time is fundamental about a good society.
There's been a human from a few centuries ago who spoke about moral freedom and all of that, Thomas Paine. Is he? I know you've referenced this other human being, and tell me more about him, since he's not around for me to talk to him.
No, Thomas Paine was an incredible human being. He believed in the rights of people, and he was involved in the French Revolution, supporting the French Revolution and the American War of Independence. He was British, but he went across, and he actually coined the term the United States of America because he believed in Republican values and he believed in economic and social rights. And his book called Common Sense was said to be in every cabin in North America. He was a very influential person, strange in some respects, but he was really a man of his period, a man who was in favor of emancipation, away from monarchies and authoritarian regimes and so on. And he actually was a supporter of a variant of basic income. He believed that everybody should have a social pension and people should be provided with the means to build their life. He is one of the originators of the idea of a basic income, but it goes back to the 13th century, long before he came into the scene, as it were, with the Charter of the Forest in England in 1217. And the Charter of the Forest was extremely important in defining the commons and saying that everybody has a right of subsistence in the commons, in the forests, in the land, in the having access to the means of production. And it was an incredibly subversive document. And basically, I've interpreted it in my books as asserting the right to work over the duty to labor. It was an assertion of commoning, the ability for people to do work together, sharing the activities, sharing the risks, and building their lives in freedom. And this document was an incredibly important constitutional document that was only really passed because the king at the time was 10 years old and he didn't realize what he was agreeing to because it was done by others in his name. And he tried many times in the 56 years afterwards while he was still alive, obviously, to try and overturn it. But people said, no, this is a vital part of the Constitution of England. And it was sealed the same day as the Magna Carta, which is the other great constitutional document. And for me, this is the original idea behind a basic income. You know, it's today we express it differently, and we've invested a lot of time in arguing for common justice, for security, for freedom, as justifying philosophically a basic income. But now, in addition, we are in a time where it's an economic imperative. Because if we don't have a basic income, the inequalities I've talked about in my books and I mentioned at the beginning will continue to explode. And the politics of that are frightening. It could be the next world war. It could be destruction of civilization. It really is a pivotal moment. And that is one of the reasons why I like talking to people like yourselves who are artists, because the artists have to give people the courage to speak up and to paint and to show and to put to music and to put to art and various ways what a good society could be like. Getting over the dystopia that we see. You mentioned earlier the frightening capacity of AI to control us.
Yes.
We need to free ourselves from that. And the only way is to be able to say, I know that they can do bad things to me, but they can't take away my right of subsistence. That is the ultimate freedom.
Okay.
And for me, this is a critical juncture that we're facing now. And I'm afraid our politicians, not all of them, but our politicians in the center are just avoiding the big issue, insecurity.
Okay, so you're not the first human who talks about this, and obviously you referenced the thing from Thomas Paine and then from before him with the 10-year-old king. And now we're at this again. How do you think you stand a better chance than the history before you?
I think, as I said, I think we're now at a point where the old social democracy that dominated politics for the last 150 years or thereabouts in Europe and elsewhere has reached its limit. We cannot have a labor-based social security system because of the chronic insecurities of the precariat. We cannot overcome rentier capitalism unless we completely dismantle it, which is going to take political not a revolution, but a political rebellion. It is frightening that our political parties are being funded by financiers, plutocrats, and so on. This moment when we're talking, recently, Elon Musk, one or maybe the second or the first most wealthy person in the world, is giving Donald Trump $45 million each month to secure his re-election as
What?
president of the United States.
5 million?
45 million per month. Now we have a situation where you can manipulate with AI, with misinformation, with fake news. Trump tells lies all the time. Everybody knows that. Okay? But you can, if you fool enough people for enough of the time, with our current electoral systems and with social media being so powerful, with the influencers, over 100 million people call themselves influencers these days on social media. In these circumstances, when we have silos of fake news and misinformation existing without a mixing, a deliberative democracy, without that, we are going to get this dystopia rushing towards us. And we don't yet have a progressive politics, a politics of paradise, a politics of transformation to offer to defeat this neo-fascist trend. And that's where we are today. But for me, I still have residual faith in the good sense of enough people that we will somehow overcome. But the last time there was a crisis of equivalent proportions was in the 1930s, when we had, the result was Nazis, Second World War, millions of people killed in the Holocaust and so on. And we're seeing today a complete genocide taking place, ironically conducted by Israel, supported by the United States. The very people who should be against what's happening, and they're doing it. And they're sending 500-pound bombs to be dropped on innocent people and killing them by the hundreds in the streets, and we see it. Where is the will to stop this nonsense, to stop this ugly, ugly set of things, whether it's Putin or it's Netanyahu or it's somewhere else in Sudan or things? We need an emancipation of gentleness, of conviviality, of respect for nature, of an integration with nature. And here I think artists of all types have a tremendous responsibility and opportunity. And that's why I salute you and people who are going into the arts these days, because it takes courage.
It does, it does. Can I ask, because it sounded like a very beautiful project which had very beautiful outcomes, the one in India specifically, where you tested the model and you had people venture out into the most interesting things. Yes, tell me about it.
It was one of the most rewarding 5 years of my life, in the sense that it took a long time for us to mobilize the money. And what we did is we provided 6,000 men, women, and children with a basic income. And we compared what happened to them with the experience of another 6,000 who didn't receive, similar people in similar villages in different places. And then to summarize the results, and we've published the results in a book and various other ways, what we saw was an improvement in nutrition, an improvement in diets, an improvement in child's health and mental development, an improvement in schooling attendance, schooling performance, an improvement in income distribution. It reduced inequalities. It increased work and production in these communities. over and above what was just the basic income. So there was what we call a multiplier effect.
Okay.
It had an incredibly positive improvement in the position of women, emancipation of women, because they had their own individual basic income. It gave them a sense of control, and they spent it on things that they gave priorities to, often relating to their homes and the children. And it improved the positions of women and others with disabilities. I was just looking to my left to see I had a copy of the book at hand, but I don't. But the front cover, you see a disabled woman sitting in a sari with a sewing machine.
I've seen the cover of the book. Yes.
Yeah, there you are. And it's a beautiful expression of emancipation of a disabled person by a simple thing. A simple thing of giving her a guaranteed basic income. It wasn't very much, but her family put part of their basic income to help her to become a full citizen of the community.
Oh, so not
Now,
only that, but they became
these
property.
things are beautiful. If you experience that, every time I go to that village, I cry. I cry.
It's a very humane thing. Um, but you as a human, you know you can't do this on your own. And
No.
as I've noticed, humanity kind of likes to leave legacy in any different kinds of forms. Art, architecture, monuments. Obviously, some examples are not so positive, but there's still legacy. How do you see yourself leave this legacy in the future?
All of us are mortal and small, and we all have to do what we want to do and what we try to do. Whenever I give a talk to a large audience, people sometimes ask me, why do you do it? And I always say, if just one person leaves the room with their views changed and their energies changed and their desire to be involved increases, then I've done a job.
Okay. Okay.
That to me is a legacy. Obviously, one should never give oneself airs and think you're important. You're not. We are all part of the human condition, and we all should do what we can to energize people to move in the direction of having everybody have basic security, everybody have freedom, everybody have mental good health, everybody can be an artist. I think you know the great statement by Picasso. Every child is an artist. The challenge is that they stay an artist when they grow up.
Right. Yeah. True.
And
Yes.
that is so true. And for me, that is what our legacy should be. When we grow old and weary and whatever, if we can look in the mirror and said, I did my little bit, I did my bit, I tried, then that's good enough.
Amazing guy. Thank you so much for this very human and very open-hearted talk today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I don't know what I can really say or do. At the end of the day, I'm only alien. But what Guy Standing made very clear to me is that the planet of Earth lives in a very delusional time at the moment that he refers to as dystopian. It also, for some coincidental reason, happens to also be the capitalist time. But get this, humans like to exploit others, it's just that they don't like being exploited. So as my dear fellow human, Corton fixes everything on the social platform of TikTok states, revolution. So in the interest of all parties involved, I am yet again prolonging my investigation into the inner works of the planet of Earth. The glitch is growing, and so is my concern about the well-being of the entire universe. And so, until next dystopian time.
Live and heard.